Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, I am Disco Katie the Crappy Crafter. Today we're going to be playing with polymer clay. I know we haven't done that in a couple weeks, but last week I said that I was going to use these molds, because I haven't put them away yet, to see how well they work with polymer clay. I did a little itty bitty tiny reading on it, like I went to one website, and they said that, you know, for the most part, and this is gonna be fun. We'll see what happens. For the most part, silicone has a very high heat resistance. And they said just to push the polymer clay directly into the molds and then cook it that way. I mean, it can't hurt to, it can hurt. It can burn my house down. But we'll see what happens. I'm gonna try cooking it, and I'm gonna try doing the freezer thing, and I'm gonna try just, you know, taking it out and seeing if I can salvage it before cooking it without doing the freezer thing. I might use just this one. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But yeah, polymer clay and silicone molds. Do you need to freeze it before you bake it? Can you bake it in the mold? We'll find out what happens. Let's get right into it. Alright, so this is basically going to be the same thing as last week, except we're going to use polymer clay. And this time we're going to just use little tiny pieces and really smoosh it in there. I get out a silicone tool. I spill a cup of water. Anyways, the silicone tool doesn't do what I was expecting it to do because it's cheap, and I was afraid the tip was just going to pop right off. That particular set of silicone tools, I had to glue all together because the metal wasn't even on the wood anyways. So this one, I was just doing this to see what would happen. I wasn't honestly expecting to pull away from the edges like it did, so I was like, you know what? We'll try it. We'll pull it out. We'll see what happens. And you know what? It doesn't look horrible. If you had nothing to compare it to, but we will, you would think that it was fine. So we have one that we pulled out, just plain. And I did condition the clay a little bit, but not like overly. So I might put it through the pasta roller like 3 or 4 times. So I conditioned it pretty good. It's nice and soft. So this one is gonna get frozen for 1 hour. And here's where I decided I wanted to have a flower to go along with it, because it's got different kind of texture. And you'll see when I first put it in, it stuck to my thumb and it popped right out. And it actually looked fine just the way it was right there. But see, trying to get it out is a little bit oof, because it stretched it, it squished it a little. Some of the petals got mushed, because you know, when I spread it open and then let it collapse back in on itself, so that didn't work so well. But these are frozen for 1 hour, and they worked amazingly well. I mean, I was really surprised. I think I managed to turn my camera off there, but I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, it came out really well. It just came out in one piece. Boom, all done. So now we're going to fill them back up a 3rd time, and the reason why I'm doing this way is because polymer clay really shouldn't ever be more than like a 1/4 inch per layer, so I'm trying to make sure that they're small. So here I'm saying that, you know, I have the ones that I pulled out, I have the ones that I froze, and I have the ones that I just smush and bake. So here we go, the ones I pulled out, the ones that I froze, and the ones that I smush and bake. So comparing the pull and the freeze, you can see that the pull is just kind of schlooped all to one side. It's kind of icky. The flowers are the same. The pull is smushed a little and kind of wonky. Here we're just going to pull out the baked piece, and it pulled out lovely, perfectly, and it looks almost exactly the same as the frozen one, which is fantastic. So if you want to use molds for your polymer clay, I absolutely highly recommend it, because it works. Because oil does get hard or harden in the cold, so it absolutely works. Yes, so that's the one that was pulled. the one that was frozen, and the one that was frozen looks just like the one that was straight baked. Highly recommend. Great. Well, I don't know what I was expecting, but I wasn't expecting it to work quite so well, because it really, really worked well, because, I mean, it makes sense with the air dry clays, because the air dry clays are generally some kind of water based, although I still feel like some of them are an ammonia based, but because they just smell like ammonia just a little bit. But anyway, so the air dry clays, put them in the freezer, they freeze because the water in them freezes. It makes sense. With these, I wasn't expecting it to work so well because polymer clays are an oil base, and while oils do solidify in the cold, I wasn't really expecting it to work quite so well. So yay. So this was the one that was just picked up and taken off, and you can see, especially compared with another one, how it's all smooshed and, you know, it's kind of slanted up there, and the backside looks awful, and it's all just smooshed and ickied. But when we compare the frozen, because, you know, the harder, it was probably frozen, I don't know, with the one that we just popped right into the oven, you can see that there aren't a lot of differences. It did deform a little bit when I took it out of the mold, and you can see there are spots where there were some bubbles. Oops. It did deform a little bit when I took it out of the mold when it was taken out of the freezer, but not nearly as much as when it hadn't been put in the freezer. So, again, with the roses, let's see. This one was just smooshed in and then taken out, and then this one was smooshed in and then taken to the freezer and then brought back and then taken out. So yeah, those work really well. I mean, if you didn't know that it was a little smooshed, you probably wouldn't know that it was a little smooshed. But when you compare it, you can see that there's a big difference there. And again, comparing the one that was frozen with the one that was just popped right into the oven, and I mean, there's not a lot of difference there, but I really do think that if you trust your silicone molds, absolutely put them in the oven. I was a little leery on that because I have seen people do stupid things in the oven. Like, they have put cutting mats in the oven, although to be fair, they may not have been silicone. Silicone has a pretty high temperature threshold, and I don't think a standard kitchen oven excuse me. I don't think a standard kitchen oven is really going to affect that. I think the maximum they can go to is 600. I don't know what the minimum melting thing for silicone is in general, but it's probably not going to be 250. I can guarantee that, because that's what these go in for. These go in at about 250. I mean, I don't know if you remember, I have my own little oven. I bought it specifically for this purpose. Little tiny oven. And it doesn't have a very good temperature control, and it's small and it's cheap. I mean, I got it for $20, so it's cheap. So its own temperature regulation probably isn't as good as it could be, but part of the reason why I got this is because it's small, like an air fryer. And I've been doing my polymer clay in my oven style air fryer because it's small. The temperature theoretically doesn't shift as much, but it's hard saying, because, you know, when you put it into a big oven, it's got to have all that warm up, and then it's going to cool down to a certain temperature, warm up to a certain temperature, cool down to a certain temperature, warm, and that could be a really big range. Whereas something that's really small, it's literally this big, you know, it theoretically won't have as much time or energy or room to cool off and heat up and cool off and heat up and cool off and heat up quite to the extremes that a normal oven does. But who's to say? I don't know. They didn't burn. That's really all I can ask for. But yeah, so I have rambled well on long enough. But yeah, I highly recommend doing the freezing thing if you don't trust your silicone. And I get that, that's fine, because I sat here the entire 15 minutes that it was cooking going, is that smoke? Is it turning brown? Is it bubbling? No. It was good, it was fine, and the silicone worked just fine. It's actually still warm to the touch, but it worked really, 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 really well. But I would anyways recommend doing the freezing thing, take it out, then cook it. I don't know if I would recommend just popping silicone molds into the oven, but it doesn't seem to hurt, and the internet seems to think that it's the way to go. I don't know, I'm no expert. We're here to learn these things together. So I will probably, honestly, I'll probably use that method sometime in the future. I mean, it wasn't a horrible method, but whew. Anyways, just remember, it's got to be fairly thin, you know. Polymer clay pieces don't like to be much more than 1/4 inch thick on average, so make sure if you are going to do some kind of, you know, mold thing, make sure that you hollow it out in the center. If it's a big mold like this one was, I made sure that it was nice and hollow in the center so that it would cook fairly evenly. Otherwise it needs to cook longer, and that can burn and just be gross, and I've rambled long enough. I think it worked. Go ahead and try it. But yeah, all that being said and done, thank you so much for visiting me, and I'll see you again next week. Stay safe.